Good morning. Today on International Day of Action for Rivers, the Tibet Policy Institute felt that it is crucial and urgent to organize this panel discussion aptly titled China's Dam in Dege, where experts would examine the adverse social, cultural, and ecological impact of China's dam in Tibet and beyond. My name is Tibetv. Currently, I'm serving as the Deputy Director of Tibet Policy Institute. Thank you very much for coming here to listen to the insights of the experts. As we are all aware, there is an ongoing forced relocation of Tibetans in Dege to accommodate a large Chinese dam. Despite repeated pleas from Tibetans, the Chinese government continued to disregard those pleas for reconsideration of the dam in Dege. This dam project neither meets the need of Tibetans in the region, nor benefits the Tibetans in the region. The voices of Tibetans in Tibet are being silenced, and the priorities of the local Tibetans are being overshadowed by the needs of large Chinese cities and corporations. It is crucial in a free society for us to comprehend and draw attention to the potential consequences of the ongoing dam construction in Tibet, especially in Dege. The Chinese government has evidently failed to conduct a proper assessment of the social, cultural, and ecological impact of such dams in the region. Therefore, this panel discussion aims to enlighten Chinese officials and urge them to reconsider their decision to displace people, demolish monasteries, and to disregard ecological implications. The Tibet Policy Institute is delighted to present 4 experts in their respective fields to delve into this important issue. To give you a very brief introduction of each speaker, first we have Dege, a research fellow at the Tibet Policy Institute. Then we have Ngawang Luntu, researcher from Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy. Then we have Dr. Lobsang Yangso, senior environmental researcher from International Tibet Network. And to chair the session, we have Dr. Tenzil Hardin, research fellow from the Tibet Policy Institute. At the conclusion of the panel discussion, our 10-point calls from Tibet experts will be issued, and I hopefully you will gain more insight from the panel discussion and from the 10-point calls. With that said, I kindly ask the moderator to initiate the discussion. Thank you.
Tashtale, and welcome everyone. Let me begin the discussion by thanking you all for joining us on this important occasion. As you know, today, while the world celebrates and observes International Day of Action for Rivers, the Tibet Policy Institute saw it as a critical and timely occasion to organize a panel discussion under the title China's Dam in Dege, examining the adverse social, cultural, and ecological impacts on Tibetans and beyond. The objective of this panel is to not only shed light on the plight of the residents in Dege, but more importantly to understand, to basically deconstruct the issue itself and to give you all a comprehensive understanding of what is really happening inside Dege, why the Chinese government is building dam there, and what are the implications of this, planned dam construction in Dege. So therefore, I take this pleasure to introduce you all to our three esteemed speakers, Ms. Dege from Tibet Policy Institute, Ngawang Lungtola from Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and lastly we have Dr. Lobsang Yangso from International Tibet Network. So to kickstart this discussion, I request all the 3 speakers to provide us their opening remarks, which will be followed by 3 rounds of questions from the chair, which is me, and then we'll open the floor for the audience for a Q&A session. Let me start with Dege, who is part of the Environment and Development Desk of Tibet Policy Institute. as well as someone who studied for a while on Tibet's transboundary river, who has just yesterday published an article on hydropower project in Dege in The Diplomat. Congratulations, Deshinla. So Deshinla, can you give us a brief introduction of what is happening in Dege, your opening remarks?
Hello, Tashdile everyone. So as we all know that we have, as we all know that we have gathered here today to celebrate International Rivers Day. And it's also a day where we need to stand together in solidarity with the people of Dege who were forcefully relocated to make a way for the hydropower. And today, like what happens in Tibet will have eventually will have impact on the downstream countries. Tibet as a roof of the world, Tibet as a water tower of Asia. There were around 10 major rivers which flows from Tibet to neighboring countries. So what happens, all those dam construction, all those major water diversion projects which happen in Tibet will eventually have impact. So what happened in Tibet, it will have impact on in downstream countries. So it is a moral responsibility and duty of every nation and every communities who are dependent on these rivers to come together and speak for this Chinese forceful relocation and the damming of those rivers. So today it's happening in Tibet. It might have consequences, impact in the future for all those downstream countries. So we need to stand together. And today, as we gather here, we should, as a community, we should stand and raise these issues against the Chinese government to stop building on those major rivers of Tibet. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone gathered here. I'd like to begin by thanking the Tibet Policy Institute for organizing this timely panel discussion. Before I proceed with the main presentation of my case, which is to provide a human rights perspective on recent forced relocation and subsequent destruction of monasteries cherished and revered by the locals for centuries, we must first acknowledge that while China parades its material development, it has severely undermined the human rights aspect, which actually constitute real development. Even in the recent case of dam construction in Dege, the forced relocation is done under the pretext of Green Development Initiative. We must also be clear that presenting material advancement as development is akin to labeling a puddle in the ocean, for it covers but a small aspect of what a development should be. And there's also a question of how China, in the event of construction being carried out, would adequately compensate the locals and preserve their religious institution, including murals and paintings dating back to the 14th century. Yeah, so many of these issues will be discussed in more detail gradually. So without wasting much time, I'd like to pass the mic to my fellow colleague.
Thank you. Tashdile. Good morning, everyone. I would also like to thank TPI for organizing this event. So as Dembala said in the beginning, so today is the International Day of Action for Rivers. So communities around the world are coming together to raise awareness and also uniting in terms of protecting the rivers and also building a solidarity among the communities to protect the rivers. And so this is really, really important from the Tibet perspective and also from the Tibetan perspective as well, because as we all know that there are few problems or issues when we talk about environment and climate change in Tibet. So first one is the rising global temperature. So rising global temperature has a great impact on the rivers that flow from Tibet, and because of the rapid glacier melting, it has a severe impact on regions, major rivers as well. When we say in Asia, the major rivers like Salween, Mekong, Yangtze, and Brahmaputra rivers, so they are currently experiencing tremendous threat because of the climate change and because of the Chinese occupation of Tibet. And due to that, Chinese government's upstream dams and infrastructure development, and also a lack of governance structure in the water region area, it gives a huge impact on transboundary water system. And because of that, water security is another problem that all the major countries are facing. And so for that, the holistic solution to manage and properly manage the transboundary water system is very important. But when we look at the Chinese government's policy, Chinese government is also one of the largest hydropower dam builder in the globally. And Chinese dams, Chinese companies and banks like Bank of China and also China Development Bank, so they invest a huge amount of money in terms of financing and investing in hydropower in globally, also in Southeast Asia and Latin America and Africa as well. So the kind of behavior China, has in terms of hydropower, it has a huge impact not only on the Tibet but also on the other countries as well. So when these Chinese dam builders and companies, when they build a dam, so there are certain challenges that the environment NGOs and civil society face, because it becomes very difficult for the civil society and individuals and communities to engage with these dam builders and banks as well. So they don't, follow the international standard of human rights standard. So also on the socio-economic factors as well. And so in that process, the individuals also don't have a much, role when dealing with the Chinese dam builders globally. So I feel that I would like to say that I feel that, it's time for the international communities to come together. And since the Chinese dam building construction whole project is happening not only in Tibet, but also across the globe. Thank you.
So we did get a gist of an idea of what the three speakers will speak on, what kind of issues that they are working on today. So before we get onto the larger issue that arises from Dege, let me first come back to why we are having this discussion today, which is Dege. So let me begin this question with a very basic question to Ms. Dechen Palmo. Can you tell us where exactly is Dege, and why are they constructing dam in Dege? Why this particular region? And is there other places or region in Tibet where the Chinese government has already built dams? If so, what are the implications?
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for your question. And first of all, if we look at the map of current China, Dege, although before the occupation of Tibet, it has been a part of Kham, Eastern Tibet. However, after the occupation, now this part of Dege, it has been incorporated into Sichuan province. So this particular dam, the recent Dege protest where people are protesting against the dam, this particular dam is built at the junction of Jomda County of so-called Tibet Autonomous Prefecture and the Dege County of the Sichuan province. So this particular dam, it has a power capacity of 1.1 million kilowatts, and actually it was planned in 2011 with the National Development and Reform Commission, along with the related ministries and the provincial government. They have come together and review the hydropower plant report. So they have agreed on building one reservoirs with a 13 level of tiers of hydropower on the upper reaches of the river. So in total, there would be around 13 dams which would be built on the upper reaches of the river. And this particular dam, Kamtok Hydropower Dam, generally in Chinese it was known as Guangdo. Then in Tibetan, the particular region is called Kamto. So after 2011, the Chinese government have started doing the preliminary research on the impact assessment on this dam. And by 2016, they have completed pre-feasibility studies of this particular dam. And then the height of dam is around 229 meter high. It's like, if we consider as per the international standard, it's considered as the large dam. And then after building this dam, we all know that there would be around 6 monasteries and the 2 villages which would be relocated because of this dam construction. And therefore, the people, they were very upset about this dam construction. Of course, this hydropower project, it will eventually have impact both on the social as well as on environment. So in terms of social impact, we have already seen that people were forcefully displaced. And then in terms of environment, they are many ongoing projects, many plant dam, and many are under construction. However, many of these project lacks the environmental impact assessment or social impact assessment. So therefore, the people were not happy with this construction of a hydropower dam on this particular rivers.
Thank you, Dege. So she just rightfully pointed out how people in Dege are being forcefully displaced. So with that question, I wanted to raise another question to our second speaker, Lungtola, from a researcher from TCHRD. Since he has been working on human rights, we would like to know how many Tibetans are being relocated, first of all. Secondly, what is the scale of destruction that the dam will cause in terms of culturally, religion-wise, and historical-wise? And finally, how is the issue of displacement, which is a huge issue right now, caused by the dam construction in Dege, is being explained from the human rights point of view?
Regarding the first question, regarding the total number of Tibetans detained, total number of Tibetans relocated, our center hasn't obtained a verified count. Hence, I think it would be both morally and academically unsound to provide or disclose information whose veracity is dubious. However, it is known thus far that around 10,000 Tibetans have been forcibly detained without adequate food and clothing, further exacerbating the already dire circumstances surrounding the peaceful expression of dissent. But we are aware that these forcefully relocated settlers or locals would be relocated into a location characterized by stringent surveillance and monitoring system. One such confirmed relocation site we know of is behind the Yebatang hydropower station, located in the junction between Peiyu and Guangzhou County. And regarding the scale of destruction, the dam, as we all know, flows right through the heart of Dege and therefore poses a threat to homes of more than 10,000 people and at least 9 monasteries, namely Tashi, Yena, Wonto, Khaldo, Gido, Tongdra, Gwonsar, Ladrong, and Rabdan monasteries. And consequently, it would not only jeopardize the environment, but also endanger the paintings and murals dating back to 14th century that are of archaeological importance. And the dams are primarily overseen by Chinese state-owned energy companies such as CHN Energy Investment Group and government-affiliated power companies like China Hodong Corporation and its subsidiary Hodong Jinsha River Upstream Hydropower Development Corporation Limited. And as far as the human rights perspective is concerned, I think I've lightly touched upon the subject, beginning with forced relocation without prior consent and discussion with the locals. And subsequent points also included the issues of redressal and compensation, resettlement problems, and the broader implication of the environment, as well as tangible and intangible heritage sites on the land that have been stewarded by the locals for almost a millennia. Thank you.
Thank you, Lungtola. So from his point of view, I think it is understandable that who's responsible behind this forceful relocation and displacement. Of course, he has mentioned a few Chinese huge companies who are behind this relocation and building of the dam construction. So regarding that, I would like to raise to our third speaker, Dr. Lobsang Sola, behind this issue, dam construction, I think there's a strong incentive from the Chinese government to comply to the so-called climate goal for peak, emission before 2030 to reach carbon neutrality before 2060, which is often referred to as the 2 carbon goals in China, right? So the question here, before we discuss China's larger goal, and environmental policies, I think it is timely to discuss on this particular issue of Dege incident. Let me ask you, what is China's carbon neutral goal that we speak of? And how does that take into action of Tibet's case being the third pole, as we believe? To make it short, how green is China's green energy?
Thank you, Alhamdulillah. I think this is a very important question and sometimes be difficult to also understand. But as you said, in September 2020 at the UN General Assembly, Xi Jinping announced that China will aim to CO2 emission peak before 2030 and then achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. So what does CO2 emission peak before 2030 mean? So it means that China will aim to reach peak of CO2 emission by 2030, and after 2030 China's emission will reduce or expected to start declining or stabilize at the level below the peak, right? And then what does carbon neutrality means? So carbon neutrality means having a balance between emitting carbon emission and also absorbing carbon from the atmosphere in carbon sink. So that's the main, I think, objective that China talks about. But I think this is not the first time where China promised to achieve, domestic carbon emission. A decade ago in Copenhagen, China also made a very ambiguous promise that they will reduce CO2 emission at the domestic level. And they also mentioned that they have achieved that as well. But for us, it's very important for us to understand that China is also currently the largest carbon emitter in the world, accounting of around 28% of the global CO2 emission in 2019. And China is also the largest coal consumer in the world, where the primary source of energy for the infrastructure and urbanization, and which accounts of 75%. And then we also have to understand that China is the second largest oil consumer in the world. But then the scholars also say that China is also the global manufacturer of the electric vehicle batteries as well. As I mentioned in the beginning, China also provides a huge sum of money for the global hydropower construction. But at the UN climate change conferences, China is also a major climate financer, providing to the developing countries in terms of adaptation and mitigation, facilities. So as I said earlier, I think China provided almost or invested almost 2,000 billion yuan in global hydropower dam construction in almost 40 Belt and Road countries or regions. So for China to receive carbon neutrality or carbon emission peak before 2030 is important not only for China but also in terms of global climate global climate protection or the emission reduction. But then it also relies on three key factors: energy efficiency, renewables, and then reduce the coal use. So these are the major factors whether China will achieve these two dual goals or not. And then 14th five-year plan of China 2021 to 2025 also plays a very important, and where they also focus about ecological civilization of China. So which means that they will move towards green growth with the Chinese political, social, and economic characteristics. But there are major problems when it comes to achieve in these policies. One is because of the local policy, and then they are less proactive from the lawmaking as well. And then another major problem is lack of public participation in the whole climate policy making, and then lack of public interest litigation lawsuit systems on the climate change as well. So for a solution, I would say that even though China has committed to achieve a massive carbon reduction, many dam builders and energy planners are proposing that hydropower is the solution for achieving these goals. But I think there are also studies says that solar and wind energy could be the solution for green energy, and through these two renewable energy, it can protect the rivers and also reduce the economic costs of other energy production. Thank you.
So I think it is important to raise here also from Lobsang's point of view that development drive is I think is a strong motivation behind why China is building hydropower project. So coming back to this point, I wanted to raise the second question to Dechen Pamura. Since she has worked on modernizing project in her research as well, what do you think are the objectives behind China's infrastructure development, particularly with regard to hydropower project in Tibet? What are the objectives of the development? What are the implications? What are the risks of such project for the people living in that vicinity?
Hello. Yeah, as Lobsang have detailed explained about the China's aim of carbon emission, peak its carbon emission well before 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. So this to achieve its aim and to neutralize their carbon emission, hydropower is one of the main project which China is pursuing. And so they are also trying to, China is also trying to position itself as a proactive leader in global water governance, climate governance. And secondly, in China there is a growing demand for energy. There is a booming industries. China also have a large number of population, and there's an urbanization happening. So for all to feed to meet the demand of energy, there is China need alternative source of energy. So hydropower, there's a growing construction of hydropower. And then thirdly, there's as we all know that China have the second largest number of world population, and around 20% of world population. However, they have very around 70% of the global water resources. So there is also instability or unequal distribution of water resources. So China, instead of managing these demand and controlling their water supply, China is moving on with the different great projects such as South North Water Diversion project, where China is trying to divert water from the Tibetan region or south of southern China towards the north of China, where major cities of China were located. So this South North Water Diversion Project is one of the main project which they are undertaking, and there's also another South-North West-to-East electricity transfer project, where by developing hydropower in major rivers of Tibet, they will divert those electricity produced from these hydropower towards the major cities of China. So these are the main objective of having so many dams built on those rivers. Then, like in terms of impact, like of course we have already seen the social impact of hydropower dam. There's a forceful relocation, and even if the people protest, they will be imprisoned or arrested and sentenced long terms of imprisonment. And then, like in terms of environment, the hydropower, those hydropower which were built in this Tibetan region, we all know that Tibet is Tibetan region where Chinese government are building have a very seismic hazard zone. So all those dams, if it can also cause the seismic induced it's a reservoir induced seismicity. So this might cause an earthquake in the region. And this is not only one or two large dams which they were building. There's a cascade of dams which were planned. And if we see in the Dege River, there were like around 13 dams which were on under construction or planned. So then, other than this Dege River, there is another Mekong and Brahmaputra rivers. So these all China. If we look into all this in detail, there were cascade of dams which were planned or under construction now. So these dams can cause earthquake as well. And other than this, these dams will also block the fish migration, and they were reducing the fish in those rivers, and many of those downstream countries, especially the Mekong region countries, they were heavily dependent on those fish for their daily consumption. And then on Yangtze River, although like Chinese government, they know that the impact of damming will have on the fish, and Chinese government in 2020 they have banned the fishing in the Yangtze River for 10 years. So however, like although the Chinese government, they are implementing so many policies to protect those fish, however on other hand they were building those dams which will eventually reduce the fish, and then like those dam will also block the silt, and which are very vital for the Mekong or the Yangtze River deltas region. So most of the sea intrusion, and there's a huge problem happening in those delta areas. And then other than this, like there's also many landslide happening, and there are like also dam is also one of the main drivers of climate change. All those vegetation which were submerged under the water, it released huge methane gas. So it is also considered not a clean energy as the Chinese government claim. Thank you.
As Dejan highlighted in her points, the risk and the social and environmental impact of hydropower project, let me ask this question to our second speaker, Lungdola. Since China is not only a member of the United Nations, but China is also re-elected as a Human Rights Council member, how do you interpret China has abridged human rights law? Specifically on Dege's, regarding Dege's issue, what are the provisions of being local and indigenous rights, and what do these legally binding means to China?
Thank you for the question. As we all know, China was recently re-elected as a member of the UN Human Rights Council during the 78th UN General Assembly from the year 2024 till 2026. And much like most worded terms employed by China to hide behind and conceal its atrocities, China's definition of equal compensation is also not clearly defined and is vague. And I bring the issue of eco-compensation here, because that has been a contentious point for China for a really long time, evident in the forceful displacement of nomads. Even in July last year, if I may be allowed to refer to my notes in case I misinterpret or misrepresent or overlook any details, even in June last year, the Chinese government outrightly denied compensation for residents, including nomads, affected by the construction of world's largest hydro solar plant, also known as Kela Mega Hydro Photovoltaic Power Station on the Yalung River, which lies in Ganze, which currently falls in Tibet Autonomous Prefecture in Sichuan Province of China. And even when there is supposed compensation, there's an apparent lack of supporting practices that would actually protect biodiversity. China's concept of eco-compensation, as I've mentioned before, lacks clarity, is vague, and it doesn't actually specify how it would directly benefit the local communities in preserving their lands. At worst, most transfer payments badged as eco-compensation never actually reach the local communities. Instead, the compensation is directed towards the authorities, cadres and officials who oversee these expulsions and forced relocations. Even the compensation for so-called resettlement houses formed in grid under tight surveillance and monitoring are often of extremely poor quality, and the forcibly relocated settlers who never asked to be relocated must pay back for the house they never asked for in a fixed duration. So clearly this is not what the rest of the world means by eco-compensation. And regarding the applicable legally binding and non-binding treaties, this would take a tad bit of time, but yeah, I think it's important. So despite voting in support of the declaration in 2008, China promptly disavowed any obligation under the declaration, which is United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, asserting there were no indigenous people in China. Although UNDRIP is not legally binding, it outlines the collective and individual rights of indigenous people. Article 8 and 10 explicitly addresses the right to avoid forced assimilation or relocation without free, prior, and informed consent. Free, prior, and informed consent is a crucial right granted to indigenous people under the UNDRIP Convention, aligning with the fundamental right to self-determination. It allows indigenous people to provide or withhold consent regarding projects impacting their territories, engaging in negotiations to shape project design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. The second convention, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, was signed and ratified by China in the year 2001, and it defines a broad sense of economic, social, and cultural rights. Specific rights includes housing, education, labor, environment, health, cultural rights, and right to self-determination. The forced displacement impacting the right to housing violates the convention ICESCR. Another treaty China has signed is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. The Article 27 of ICCPR recognizes the right of ethnic, religious, or linguistic minorities to enjoy their own culture, practice their religion, or use their language. The forced displacement of Tibetans in Dege can be considered a violation of these rights. However, to date, despite extensive pressure from the international community, China hasn't ratified the convention, and that, I think, speaks volumes about Communist Party of China. China has also ratified the Convention for Safeguarding the Intangible Cultural Heritage in 2004. The convention is an international treaty adopted by the UNESCO in the year 2003. Its goal is to safeguard and promote the diversity of intangible cultural heritage worldwide. Intangible cultural heritage includes traditions, rituals, performing arts, oral traditions, craftsmanship, and other cultural expressions passed down from generation to generation. China ratified the convention to show its purported commitment to preserving and promoting its rich cultural heritage. However, the constant attempts we see, even today, at the sinicization of religion, religious institutions, evident in the destruction or submergence of monasteries in Dege, sinicization of dances, sinicization of tales, including a reinterpretation of history of Tibet, including the reinterpretation of how Potala Palace was constructed, all tells a different story about how China is violating these conventions. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Lungdola. I think it is indeed evident from Lungdo's point of view that how China has been violating human rights inside Tibet. So, but here, in order to give you a more specific, how specific idea of how China is actually committing environmental, unlawful act, let me ask this question to Dr. Lobsang Yangsola. What is China's environmental law, and how does China's environmental law ensures the protection of environment and natural resources? How does it prevent environmental threat to the public? Because amid this increasing climate insecurity and vulnerability that we speak of, we wanted to understand what exactly is China's water policy as we speak of, and how are they breaching international environmental law, and how effective is environmental impact assessment that we speak of? Does it lack effective public participation? If it is so, why?
That's a lot of questions. I think from all the questions that you have asked, I would like to emphasize more on public participation in terms of environment law. And as you were saying, what is China's environment law and how effective they are. So I think for us, the relevant issue for us is in terms of public participation. So what does public participation in terms of environment law or water law? Public participation doesn't only mean about creating awareness or recruiting volunteers in the environment conservation works. Public participation means access to information and also an opportunity to participate in decision making, which is very crucial with the issue of Tibet, because that's what is missing in decision making, and that's where all the problems arise, and that's why we see incident in Dege, because people were not consulted when they were planning for the dam construction in Dege. Public participation also means facilitating public awareness, and then most important is to give access to effective judicial and administrative proceedings. So whenever there is a public, they have an issue or concerns to be raised, so there should be a judicial access, and effective judicial access is very, very important in that. So how did China look and where does the public participation comes in China's environment law? So the first one, when we talk about Chinese Constitution of 1982, which was last amended in 2018, it says very little about the public participation, or almost nothing about the public participation in environment decision making. And then 5-year plans are really, really important, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of policy formation. In the 5-year plans, they have recommended public participation, but it's not a legally binding or not a strictly, followed. So it's not a compulsory. That's what we can also say. The third is environment impact assessment. Environmental impact assessment is really important, where the Chinese governments, it has to set up an independent office where they would access they would give access of any project that is happening on that area. So that is very important. But then in the environment impact assessment, they said that public participation is compulsory. But then scope of implementation is another question that we have to, concerned about, or the application is very limited in that. So even though environment impact assessment was introduced in 1970s and then it became a law in 2003, so much of changes brought in terms of implementation of the law. But then public participation is a very crucial factor when it comes to effectiveness. How effective is the environment impact assessment? In China, there are around 2,000 environmental NGOs, but they are, how much the role the environment NGOs play in terms of public participation is another question, because due to political reasons, they are not able to play a very crucial role. So most of the time, they are either concentrated on deploying awareness creation or recruiting environment volunteers. So that becomes the major role of environment NGOs. So out of 2,000 environment NGOs, when China, they formulated environment protection law in 2015, they allowed only 200 green environment NGOs to be given a public lawsuit rights, and which means that the individuals were not provided rights to give the lawsuit against the big companies or the big projects. So the major problem that, as I mentioned earlier, is the weak implementation of the policy, failure to hold accountability of the officials giving more emphasis on economic development rather than on environment protection. So these are the major challenges when it comes to effectiveness of the environment impact assessment as well. If environment impact assessment, if China implements this environment impact assessment, it has a great role in terms of environment protection, and which would also allow a public to participate in the decision making as well. So I think there should be both the government and the civil society communities to be participated in environment laws or the water laws. Without having public participation in the decision making or having a right to access to judicial or administrative proceedings, so these laws or policies would not make any sense. In China, the policies are really good in terms of documentation, but implementation is another challenge that we see, and that's why the issue in Dege is one example of such events. Thank you.
So I'll raise one last round of questions to all the three speakers, and I request the three speakers to make it short so that we'll get more questions from the audience. So the last round of questions, first to Dechen La. Since Lobsang just mentioned in her talk about the abject lack of inclusivity, right, in the decision-making process, and I think that's the exact case in Dege. So can you, Dechen Pamela, give us an idea of the past history of China's dam construction, not just in Dege, but other parts of the regions in Tibet? How similar are those cases, and how different are those cases?
This is not one particular case. There were many relocation happened because of the hydropower dam, and one such dam relocation happened because of Wunolong Dam. This Wunolong Dam was built in completed in 2019, and it was built at Dechen County of Yunnan province, and this dam is one of the 11 dams built on the Mekong River. During this dam construction, China have ordered people from nearby villages. Most of them are Tibetan villages. They were ordered to move to Shizong village, which is a Tibetan Christian community living on the upstream. So these people, as per the official estimate, there were around 800 people who were forced to move on the Shizong village. So Shizong village, it is like have very unique environment, as well as their culture is totally different, and also most of the people of the Shizong village, they follow the Christian religion. So while moving those people from the other villages, like Chinese government, they don't assess the social impact of moving those Buddhist community to the Christian community village. So this one particular incident happened, and however, people over there, they are very upset with the people of Shizong, although they says that they are not the one who were relocated. However, they have this they face the same impact of because of this dam. And there were other villages, like they have to give up their farms and the fertile lands to make homes or villages for the people coming from the relocated people. So these happen in this particular region. However, the similarities between this relocation which happened in Dege and what happened in this Yunnan province is that in both cases people were not consulted. The people were kept in dark. They don't know where and when and how they will be relocated, and neither people were aware about the compensation which they will get from this relocation. And the dissimilarities which I think, it's that in case of the Wunolong Dam, it is mainly about the livelihood. Who people, when they are displaced, their livelihood will have be impacted. And in case of this Dege dam, people, it is it is not only the people who will be relocated. It is the monasteries where the sacred Chinese government, they ignore the sacred nature of these monasteries and their importance in culture, religion, and value system of Tibetan Buddhism. So when they were told to move in case of Wunolong Dam, they have even though it is involuntarily, they have moved to these other place where they were given. However, in this case, the people, they doesn't want to, because it's not only about the own livelihood. It is also about the their devotes to the monasteries, and these are the similarities and differences which I found.
Thank you, Dejinla. So displacement is a major issue here. And let me ask this final question to Lungtola. Since displacement has been a major issue with regards to China's dam building spree on rivers in Tibet, and I believe that Dege is not an isolated case in this scenario. How do you understand this situation from human rights researchers' point of view?
Since we've talked so much about compensation, I'll compensate for my lengthy answer in the previous question by answering this one shortly and briefly. Well, from a human rights researcher's standpoint, the situation in regions affected by dam construction underscores the urgent need for accountability, transparency, adherence to international human rights treaties, and calls for thorough investigation, meaningful consultation with affected communities, and the establishment of fair compensation mechanism to address severe human rights violations associated with these dam projects.
Thank you. So these adverse, imposition of these adverse policies on Tibetans inside Tibet by Beijing is an abject violation of human rights, as you mentioned. But more importantly, from a broader perspective, let me ask the last question to Dr. Lobsang Yangsola. The recent protest in Dege needs to be seen in the context of this long resistance against the Chinese oppression and occupation, and the repressive policies that China has maintained over Tibet and Tibetan people. Do you see this part as China's colonial project in Tibet?
Thank you, Ladala. If we refer to colonial power as only to occupation, then I think dam construction would become a consequence of the consequence of colonial power. And because thus the current incident in Dege could be also a consequence of Chinese colonial control on Tibet. It becomes a part of the China's larger goal to create and clean energy or carbon neutral goal. But typically, the colonial power also refers to systematic efforts undertaken by the colonial power to control land, to control people, and exploitation of resources, and also imposition of colonial governance structure as well. So over here, there are four main points that we can see. One is the resource exploitation, and then control and governance, and then infrastructure development, and displacement and dispossessions. So in terms of resource exploitation, the Chinese government is exploiting the natural resources and hydropower for the benefit of the larger Chinese community, and also for the benefit of the industries and the population, the Chinese population. Control and governance, where the Chinese government controls the area, controls the land, and then it changes the governance structure where the resettlement process happens, and then it also changes the economic activities of the local community. So that also becomes another component. And then infrastructure development also becomes the part of part of the colonial power, is to facilitate control of the infrastructure and expansion of the colonial administration as well. So, and then building up transportation networks and industrializations. So all of this, serves the purpose or serve the interest of the colonized colonial power, which is China. Then finally, displacement and dispossession. So with this Chinese government's, the colonial project of dam construction in Tibet, it creates a displacement of the people, and it also marginalized the whole Tibetan community, and the whole Tibetan community in a larger context, the India, where in other areas, when the European powers, when they had a colonial expansion in Europe, in other countries in Asia and in Africa, it marginalized or dispossessed the whole indigenous communities or the local communities as well. So the displacement, led to, clay use for the colonizer to use the clay use of the land for the benefits of the people. So in a way, even though, dam construction, I think could be or may not always be explicitly framed as a part of the colonial project, but it could be also a consequence of the consequences of the colonial powers by furthering their goals of control and, achieving or serving the purpose of the colonial power, which is China, and then bring resource exploitation and then also dominance over the Tibetan people.
So since we are running out of time right now, I think we'll only be able to take maybe 2-3 questions from the audience. And please let us know whom you are directing the questions to.
Good morning, everyone. My question is for Dejenla. And so, what is the strategy we need to reach out for the international community to take an immediate action on the current issue in Dege, especially for those downstream nations who are survive on the Tibet rivers. And second is, was there any response from the Chinese government in solidarity with the Dege people by the government and non-government in exile?
Thank you for your question. As I've mentioned earlier, that since we all know that Tibet is the source of major international rivers. So what happens in Tibet, it won't remain in Tibet. Eventually, it will have impact downstream countries. Today, it's happening in the Dege. Tomorrow, it would be on the other rivers, major rivers like Mekong and then Brahmaputra. So it will have impact on India. If China's government built dam on the Brahmaputra rivers, it will have impact on India as well as in Bangladesh. So what happens in Tibet, it won't stay there, right? So we have urged, and we all we need Tibetan, as a Tibetan, we need to amplify the voice of Dege people, and the people, they are because of the dam construction, the people, they are suffering. So we need to amplify these words as we are in independent nation where we can raise our concern, and we can freely raise our issues. However, in Tibet, they when they raised this against this appeal against the Chinese government, they were arrested or put in jail. As in other downstream countries, they need to come together and they need to raise this issue with the Chinese government. They need to pressurize this with their own government, and which will consequently will have pressurized the Chinese government. So beside this, yeah, that's the answer to your question. Thank you.
Allow me to sit because I may block the rest of the audience and the cameras at the back. So thank you, TPI, for organizing this timely panel. So as a Tibetan, it's deeply hurt and saddens us to see the disparate situation inside Camp Dege, where our Tibetan brothers and sisters are desperately appealing and urging the Chinese authorities by prostrating on the streets in front of the perpetrators. So it deeply saddens us, and our Tibetan general public, especially our youth, are showing solidarity or expressing their emotions in the social medias, and we all know that's not enough to stop the construction of the dams and or to stop the demolition of our centuries-old cultural heritage. So my question is, what are the roles of the organization and especially Tibetan youth to stop the Chinese from construction of the dam, or at least to get a deserving compensation or justice to the local Tibetan people? That's my first question. And my another question is, TCHRD has come up with a report on the current situation in Camp Dege. So what's the response from the international organizations and the news medias especially? So my question is to TCHRD.
Well, to answer your question, I'll attempt to answer your question. I don't know if I will. But I think advocacy is a good tool to amplify the voices of Tibetan people inside Dege. I think the Tibetan youth can share information about what is happening in the region by telling their friends, social circles, using their social media sites. Yeah, those are the ways so Tibetan youth can, disseminate information about what is happening inside Dege. And regarding your second question, yeah, we did publish a report, and yeah, we do get, queries from different media outlets. I also have some queries to answer after this panel discussion. So yes, yeah, we do get questions. Yeah, I think, does that satisfy your?
Sorry. My question would be to Rolosayansala. Rolosayansala, you talked about solar power as the solution with reference to experts on environment and climate change. China recently has been trying to create itself as the champion of climate change, mitigating those changes, bringing those policies. But in reality, on ground, it's been kind of different, right? When you talk about solar power as the alternate solution to it, to cut down the carbon emissions, there has been forced relocation by building and constructing of huge solar power plants. There has been no or disregard to their consents, and disregard to their rights. But what China says globally and what they're trying to do on ground is totally poles apart. So I would like to have more insights, your insights on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lekdela. Before I answer to Lekden's question, I would also like to come to Swensi's question about social media and the role of youth. I think this is really, really important. I think we should be able to utilize the effectiveness and the strength, or understand the the strength of the social media. The kind of information that we received on Dege is through the video, and so people inside, they share videos to us through social media. So that's where, we got the information, and then through the Tibetan news media, so the public got awareness on that. So we should sometimes, we shouldn't be underestimate the power of social media and the youth. With the social media, it's, it can reach, millions of people, beyond our reach. And so that's what I felt, that if youths are more comfortable in, engaging through social media and then spreading the issue on Tibet issue, I think we should continue on that. And based on that, nowadays our younger generations have lots of skills creating, different infographics and reels, Instagram, and and then we should be more active in Twitter as well. So these are the different facilities that we have access, which is not there in Dege right now. So we should be able to utilize that and put more effort. Maybe, Tibetan civil societies or Tibetan political NGOs should be able to also understand the effectiveness of the social media, and then mobilizing younger generation in the movement, so that, we can reach to a higher, audience, or to a larger audience. So coming back to Leiden's question about, solar power and how that is implemented. Yes, I think scholars do think or do consider that solar power or the wind power could be alternative for the, the hydropower energy. And at the world, the many of the international organizations, they say that China has the largest solar and wind power energy. But as we said or discussed earlier, so what is the practical, what is the reality in Tibet is that right now in Tibet, I think solar power has been built in many of the Tibet's region, Pebegi, saja kyong changmal the chogosum saja kyong la ani kalota nilo gagi digi leshipe yo. And but I feel that one, there has not been much of the international attention on that. The second is that the kind of, when we say solar power construction, that doesn't mean that you can construct solar power anywhere, everywhere, wherever you want, without consulting the local people. So that is happening in Tibet, right? In Tibet, they are building solar powers on the Tibetan grassland. And the grassland are supposed to receive sunlight, and to sustain that, it has to have, open space and receive the sunlight as well. If a solar power is built on the grassland for really long time, suppose for 20 years or 30 years, what will become the status of the grassland? Rata pegetone deshit shichuachi pebegi tsatangi gangla kunzogi nilo de gege yorwa ani nilo de gedugala kunzogi nilo gedu ande kalagordi shache tichimbo like they para the center to parts of doegi and consider no migration ke to the space the sugi like yo yige tsatangi gangla nilo de shuk chembo chi be chembo chi yo and the good umbo chi chawana tsatang de tola du yo la ne gala scientists that denso ge digal concern the chagi yo. So I think we should be really aware of that. As we discussed earlier, public participation is really, really important. Environment impact assessment is really, really important. And what is China doing inside Tibet is how, for the benefit of the Chinese and to serve the purpose of the Chinese state, utilizing and extracting all the natural resources without even consulting Tibet is completely wrong. And we should strongly oppose that. So I think that's what I think this message is not able to reach at the international level. So it's role of us to, I hope, maybe in future more research and more publication from Beijing on the subject would really help, and that would draw international attention on the subject. Thank you so much.
And also, if I may add something, well, Chinese policymakers, we must understand that Chinese policymakers are mere rubber stamps for the authoritarian view with perpetuated development only on paper, not in real implementation.
One last question.
Yeah. I'm just going to try to keep it completely brief. My question is for Ms. Ladula. I just wanted to get an insight into what are the initiatives undertaken by TPI or CTA in large to address the global governing bodies on the current concerning issue, and what would the way forward be for a more prominent and localized global intervention?
Okay. Sorry, so I'm not prepared at all to take questions on the Dege issue right now. But I think very recently, Department of Information and International Relations has just concluded TSG meeting, right? And in there we have around more than 150 participants participating at the event. They, at the time, this was at the time when Dege issue just, came to the light. And I think with leadership of under Department of Information and International Relations, they could able to bring forth, what is happening inside Dege. Not just that, but from a Tibet Policy Institute, like I mentioned earlier, Dege, who is individually working on, particularly working on dam construction. She has written the article and she's published in The Diplomat, which is a very reputed, I would say, website. Have a look on it. Not just that, but this event itself, we have organized this in order to not just shed light on the Dege issue, but more importantly, like Lobsangla mentioned earlier, there wasn't enough attention given to Dege, not just Dege incident, but as she mentioned earlier, there were many dam construction that happened earlier in various regions in Tibet, right? Why aren't there enough, news being written on this issue? I think that concerns more to say, I believe that if it's like, for instance, if it's on Brahmaputra, it concerns downstream nations, particularly India. And that's why India comes into light, sharing their concerns on why China is building dam. But in terms of Dege, who is being, impacted by the Dege dam construction? I think because there are no stakeholders other than the Tibetans, I would say. There are no, enough attentions given to the livelihoods of Tibetans in Dege. I think in that wise, I think Tibet Policy Institute is trying to, level up the sort of, attentions that we need on this particular issue. And this event is particularly the reason why we are having this, event today. And yes, after this, she's like, after this event, all the three speakers, including me, will, provide a 10-point call, action call on this Dege incident, which will be followed right after.
May I please add one final question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Please be brief.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So it's very evident from your talks that it is crucial to work together and collaborate with other downstream countries that are dependent and are impacted by the rivers that originate from Tibet, right? So in that regard, I would like to ask, it's an open question, that what are the efforts that we are making from our side to come together with these countries and work together collaboratively?
Who wants to take the question? Lobsang, make it brief, please.
Efforts side. I would like to be very honest and open over here. To be honest, because of the political reason, because of the downstream nations, their political relation with the China, sometimes it's very difficult to reach out to them and to collaborate with them. But we are trying to reach out to the civil society communities, academicians and activists, young activists, environment activists from the downstream nation. So that's one, through organizing conferences. Recently, TPI organized a conference in Thailand with the downstream nations, and we did focus a lot on Mekong River as well. We had speakers from various countries. The second that we do is attending international conferences like COP, UN Climate Change Conferences, UN Water Conference, the Water Week Conference, to create, more network collaboration with the downstream nation. So that's what we are doing, and then we also do lots of advocacy work at the UN in terms of raising issues on nomads relocation in Tibet. So these are the various issues that we focus, and I'm sure we need more capacity, and there are much more works that has to be done, and it has to be more collaborative, and collaboration sometimes brings more successful results. So I think with that, we, through the civil society and Tibetan government exile, we also collaborate on many issues, and among the Tibetan groups there is much of collaboration. And I would like to finally say that we should also have more collaboration with the Tibetan scholars, Tibetan researchers, along with the Tibetan political NGOs, in terms of creating awareness on the issue, or raising awareness on the issue, on finding, and hopefully in future to have some collaboration and cooperative work with the Chinese environmental NGOs in the future. That could also bring a positive result. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll continue the discussion right after this event. We have lunch prepared for all the audiences here. So let me close this event by requesting a final request to all the three speakers to provide us a closing remarks. Let's start with Dege.
Okay, so recently Chinese government have come up with the Human Rights Action Plan from 2021 to 2025. In that Human Rights Action Plan, China have made commitment to some commitments with regard to environment. So Chinese government, they have agreed to enhance transparency in eco-environment information, and so we urge Chinese government to make their commitment, and they should prioritize the transparency by disclosing more information about the hydropower development in major rivers of Tibet. And then, secondly, they have agreed to increase the public involvement in environment decision making. So as we have clearly seen that the Chinese government, they are not following as per their commitments. They should be Chinese government should improve their public participation in planning and decision making with regards to dams and other related infrastructure development in Tibet. And then Chinese government should also made commitment and should stick to the environmental impact assessment. They should conduct before any kind of infrastructure development. And other than this, they should also do a proper seismic risk assessment. So as we all know that Tibet, most of the Tibet regions were under the seismic hazard zone. So once Chinese government, they build dam, they need to do a proper seismic hazard assessment before developing any project on those rivers. Thank you.
As far as my recommendations are concerned, first is advocate for free, prior, and informed consent. Governments, NGOs, and civil society groups must pressure China to genuinely adhere to free, prior, and informed consent principles, ensuring proper compensation, resettlement, and preservation of cultural heritage before initiating any projects involving or requiring local consent. Second is disengage from business affecting Tibetan environment. The international community should immediately cease conducting business relations with Chinese companies involved in these shady businesses under moral pretense of green development initiative. And thirdly, China must immediately ratify human rights treaty, especially in regards to local indigenous people and communities, and stop its coercion related to relocation or destruction of culturally significant sites. Thank you.
My three recommendations are: first, to recognize the ecological significance or importance of Tibet. China and the global community should acknowledge the ecological significance of the Tibetan Plateau, recognizing its unique biodiversity and also influence on global weather pattern and also role in securing food and water security in Asia. Second, address the colonial behaviors in Tibet. Recognize and rectify the impact of Chinese colonial policies in Tibet since 1959, including resource exploitation, dam construction, and forced resettlement of Tibetan nomads in Tibet, and also adopt a right-based approach to protect frontline communities and respect traditional knowledge of Tibetan communities. Finally, cease criminalization of environment defenders. The Chinese state should refrain from criminalizing Tibetan environment defenders and release all individuals like Anya Senda and Kama Samtup, and also release all the detained peaceful activists around Tibet against the dam construction and forced relocation in Tibet. Thank you.
Let me add one more point to the recommendation on the expert call. Cease construction of dams without local consent. Considering the potential social, cultural, and ecological impacts of the ongoing dam construction in Dege, the Chinese government should halt the construction of all large hydropower dams, which are against the need and wishes of the local communities. Additionally, any forced relocation should cease immediately, and Tibetans unjustly detained for expressing their concerns should be unconditionally released with proper medical care provided to the injured. With this, we have come to the end of the event. And let me thank the organizer, Tibet Policy Institute, and especially thank you to the audience for your outstanding questions. Thank you to the media for your, for your presence here. Especially, I would like to extend my deep gratitude to the three speakers, Dechen Palmula, Lungdola, and Lobsang Yangzola, for tirelessly taking up the questions. Thank you all, and let's continue the discussion during our lunch.
Please remain seated for 2 more minutes. I would like to thank all the speakers for raising some very, very important issues. Hopefully that those issues being raised here would educate the Chinese government on the social, cultural, and ecological impact of Chinese dam in Tibet. And of course, to the session moderator for very effectively chairing the session. And I hope what we have done here would give the Chinese government some idea that they need to have some expert analysis of what's happening in Dege. Hopefully, the Chinese government would allow experts in the field of history, culture, religion, and ecology to visit Dege or other Tibetan areas and conduct actual impact assessment there, and also hear local communities. Now, here, as said earlier, we are releasing a 10-point call from the experts. This is basically a summary of what is being discussed and what is being highlighted. So I request all the 4 speakers to stand up, and we'll hold this together for as we release it, and then we'll distribute to the old media and the panel audience here. And I would also like to acknowledge all 4 representatives from the 4 major non-government organizations present here who raised questions on behalf of the organization. Thank you very much for coming. Here we'll stand up for the